Hey, welcome back to the Invisible Strength podcast. Today's guest has figured out how to live fully despite being diagnosed with lupus at a young age. She's co-authored the book Fabulupus, which is about being young, successful, and fabulous despite living with a chronic illness. So today we'll get into Jodie's story and how she has managed to figure out how to live fully with lupus. Jodie, excited to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much.
And Chris, as always, it's good to see you. Thank you for being a part of this conversation.
Great to be here with you as always, Karin, and excited to chat with you, Jodie.
Yes, so
Jodie, to kick us off, can you just share a little bit about yourself?
broadly speaking, yes, lupus that I would say is kind of my primary or my anchoring diagnosis. However, like a lot of individuals living with chronic conditions, I have accumulated a few other letters along the way, a few other diagnoses. But aside from my health, I'm a social worker. I work in healthcare. I am a mother, very fortunate to be a mother, and I yes, I'm co-author for Fabulupus, as well as I have a few interests of side ventures where I have a little side crafting business of sewing and embroidery, and I have launched just this year a side mindfulness and mindfulness groups as well. So a lot going on, but all things always a balance between having things that fuel your energy and fuel your passion, because sometimes having something on the calendar is actually can add to your energy versus not having too much. So that's kind of been my approach.
For it. Your book title calls out being young, successful, and fabulous, even with lupus. So how has that mindset shaped who you are as an entrepreneur, an author, and a lupus warrior?
Yes, so I am ironically past the identified kind of age bracket for the book, but when so the book was published, I would say 11. I would have to double check my math, but 11 this past December, and it took us 10 years. So we're thinking like this is way before social media. This is way before self-authoring and self-publishing. And at the time when we published, there was no other book out there that talked about how to live your life with not just lupus, but we double checked across a number of chronic health conditions of MS, diabetes, cancer. And there was no book out there that talked about how to live your life. How do you have a relationship and tell a potential partner that you have a chronic condition and how it might impact on your life? How do you still live your life but manage your relationship with parents that have alienated you or parents who are overprotective? What are your options for pursuing their education? Options for disclosing or not disclosing accommodations in the workplace? What about travel? What about spirituality? What about like daily movement? So all these life things, we were the first book out there that talked about any of that. And I certainly, ironically, as we were writing it all, I was in the middle of my social work studies, and at one point, I kind of turned to my co-author, being like, "This is a very social work book. It touches on all these things that I talk with my clients and patients about, and that I'm here to support them through." And so I very much live it all day to day from lens, depending on the what hat I'm wearing at it on any given day or any given moment. Yeah.
Judy, you bring up a lot of key points and hurdles that many of us go through with chronic illness. Definitely want to get into each of those, but I'm curious, can you take us back to how your lupus and other chronic illness journey started?
Yes. So I was diagnosed relatively young as far as things go. I was diagnosed the week before I turned 13, and that was after years of symptoms. Have symptoms around when I was 4, and my parents were very supportive along the whole thing, always believed me that there was something, not just fatigue, not just growing pains, not just, muscle soreness because dance, or, they always kind of believed me that there was something more going on there. And they brought me to every single possible practitioner that you could think of, like not just through Western medicine, but I had my eyes read. I had my irises read at one point. Like we did like the spectrum of like alternative and natural medicine to Western medicine, trying to find there. And I was actually earlier on, around when I was 8 or 9, I was actually seen by rheumatology and tested for lupus, but I didn't have all the markers because you need to have so many markers out of the possible symptoms plus blood work. And I was missing like one thing for them to formally diagnose me. And then when I was 12, it was kind of like this eruption of a bunch of symptoms. And I was like, okay, let's go back and revisit that.
That is such a tough period of time. You're already going through so many changes, challenges, and then you add these symptoms on top of it. What was going through your mind during that time?
Ironically, not too much. I just always felt that I had like the love and support of my family. I went through the usual things that, but some things that many kids go through. There was a bully in my class, and there's this, that, and the other. But through that whole younger period, it was not too bad. I didn't really have a lot of thoughts. To me, it was just my parents believed me. We're going through a lot of different testing, but I didn't see myself as being necessarily different than anybody else. And maybe my parents worked very hard to make sure that I didn't feel like I was different because I still participated in any number of things, pool or dance or figure skating or kind of different activities that I was a part of. And so kind of built this supportive community around me. My 13 to 16-year-old period was challenging. I actually had a harder time during that with trying different medications and then side effects for the medications. And 13 years old and gaining 30 pounds in 1 month is a lot for grade 8, right? It could have been a lot, but again, it came back to social network. My mom worked in the school system. She knew all the kids that I was in class with. She knew who were the ones that had supportive parents. She knew all the teachers, so she could kind of talk and brief them ahead of time. And so really working all of that, they did a lot of work in the background to make sure
Hmm.
little as possible on the front end of things. But I know that that's not the experience for many, many. So when I went to my clinic at Sick Kids, sometimes I was admitted, sometimes it was once a week, sometimes it was once a month. Like most of my teenage years, I was fairly frequently going for hospital visits. They had a room set aside for all the teenagers to have a bit of a social support group, informal, while we were waiting for our appointments. And then they had a separate space for the parents to kind of chat amongst themselves while waiting. Talking to those other teenagers very much reinforced for me how fortunate I was for social circumstances and the family that I had. Because there was any number of teens that were completely disowned, kicked out of the house because of their diagnoses, not believed by their parents, having a hard time because their school wasn't giving them accommodations, et cetera, et cetera. So it's who you have around you can make such a big difference. Because
Absolutely.
the mindset you have of knowing the support that you have around you, and I lived it, and then now I study it as a social worker, of even just perceiving that you have social support, whether you don't reach out to them or not, makes such a big difference on your stress level and then impacts on your symptoms and stuff and how you cope with something. So the perception of that makes a big difference. And so I just kind of lived through that and been very fortunate and grateful, a lot of gratitude.
Yeah, all the things, all the things. Because when you're describing it, the thought that or phrase that came to my mind, Jody, was like, "Wow, like no stone was left unturned." Whether we're talking about the diagnosis or even just your parents, and I think about that as a parent myself, like working those back channels with the other parents and being like, "Hey, like this, that, and the third," just making sure everything was okay. Like as you think about that as an adult now, looking back, do you think that sort of foundation and network, as you described, is what allowed you to have the comfort to be able to share your story rather than, there's so many other lupus warriors who keep the story so private and hidden for fear of, employers or community and all sorts of stigmas being attached to them. Do you think that foundation is what gave you the confidence to share?
Absolutely, absolutely. And my parents jumped in right away with being involved with local support groups and then and different levels of education, fundraising, advocacy, and whatnot. So jumped right into that right away as well with them. But then I would look around the room and be like, okay, I get this. It's nice to have the support around you, but there's about 30 to 40 years difference between me and everybody else in this
Come
room.
on, right, right.
So so there's a lot that we can't relate on. And then into me of, okay, so I'll write some paper newsletter still back in the day. It wasn't a social media.
Yes, yes.
So I'll write some articles. Every month I'll write an article relevant to the younger population, and that can be helpful for them maybe to at least see someone else's living. And then that led to me connecting more and actually starting my own support group for youth, the autoimmune conditions. And then that led to the book. So everything kind of spiraled, but absolutely the baseline was understanding that I had this good support around me. And part of that meant talking about it.
Mhm.
Whether it be my parents talking about it or me talking about it and having somebody in my, having somebody have my back while I spoke about it made such a big difference. Never, I've never shied away from talking about it. There's sometimes within certain work environments where I may not completely say the whole story, but I'll say the piece that they need to know. That's absolutely within my, within my right to do that. But right, never shied away. At the same time, I don't necessarily walk up to somebody that I'm meeting new, being like, "Hi, I'm Jodie. I have lupus." There's a
He's my icebreaker, right?
what's it one fact about me, right? Not
Well, actually.
but it's very much I've talked about right from the get-go. And then that openness has absolutely let others around me be more comfortable, whether or another diagnosis or something else, be more comfortable to be talking about it, whether it be with me or actually just talk about it more with someone else in their life or to reach out for support through whatever network or association. So absolutely, I don't always see that ripple effect.
Hmm.
Living honestly with my condition certainly has impacted on more people than what I know.
Yeah, of course. Of
Very
course.
much so. And it's remarkable that you've been so open even early on in your journey. I know for me personally, it took me a long time to get the courage to talk freely about having lupus. But you bring up a really good point and question that a lot of our community members have is how do they communicate a condition like this to their employer?
Hmm. I think part of it depends where you work because there's sometimes where you have different structures on if you would talk to your manager or do you talk to STAR or do you talk to OC Health. So first is knowing kind of who you need to be channeling your concern to or your request for accommodation to. And you absolutely don't have to disclose what your diagnosis is, but framing it in a way. So recently, this past year, the last couple of years have actually been, I'm stable now, but the last couple of years have been a bit of a go. And so I had to ask for some accommodations at work. And we just basically framed it of, I need this to help me work more stably and actually come back to work and work this number of hours or less hours because I don't have the accommodation I need for, I was requesting only do one intensive task at a time and then having a 5 or 10 minute kind of brain break, whether that be I walk down the hall or I stare out the window and do 5 minutes of mindfulness of, oh, look at the trees swaying. And then we requested a sit to stand desk and very much kind of framed that of if I'm sitting all the time, longer break because my pain is great. But if I have to always stand, same thing. And giving me options to change my posture means I can work for longer stretches before I need a break.
Yeah, yeah.
I always keep in the back of my mind when framing my requests for accommodations, how is this? What do I need? But also framing it kind of in a way as how is this beneficial to the employer? And again, not necessarily disclosing my conditions. Now, I've worked in the current place where I am for 15 years. So most of them know. Most of them know my diagnosis, even if they don't say it out loud and they know they can't ask me about it. But there's that. But then on the other hand, I always encourage when I'm talking to people to think about for your own safety. Is there someone that you're always working next to? Or is there someone always in the office next to you? Or is there someone who's always, if you're a remote worker, is there someone who has the same hours as you that you would feel comfortable to disclose enough that if you were having a medical emergency in the middle of the work, that you had someone to reach out to. So no, you don't have to disclose to your employer or your manager or your direct boss, whoever you report to. But at the same time, what about your safety? Right? What about your safety? Because you just never know when something is going to happen. I heard a very tragic story 2 weeks ago. Someone was in the workplace and they were the only one that knew the combo to their locker where they had to keep their personal belongings, and they ended up having an anaphylactic reaction, didn't get and no one else was able to get into locker for them. And that's an extreme, but at the same time, any of us could have any type of kind of medical emergency. Like, what if I faint in the middle? Someone on my team at least should know to flag of she has this condition. Make sure you check her chart for what medication she's on right now, or something. Check her bracelet, right? Like just
Hmm.
someone to point the first responders in the right direction. So,
Absolutely.
a two-sided answer to your question.
It's great.
Yeah, truly, truly. And I guess it makes me think about on your journey, even with all the success that you've had and the support that you've had, was there a moment where you felt like this is rock bottom? Like a time, whether it was physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, where you did not know if you were going to make it through this journey?
So, not related. So there was 2 points related but not related. One, the time where I had the hard 2 times where I had the hardest time mental health-wise, which of course then impacts on everything, right? It
Of
does
course.
impact cognitive, it impacts on your physical, it impacts on everything. One was when I was going through, fertility treatments. I did need fertility treatments for for success with pregnancy, and I think it just hit me so much of I had worked so hard for so many years to be stable enough and to wean off the medication I couldn't be on while pregnant, and I had worked so hard to get my body into a point where I could safely become pregnant, and then I just felt like, "This is not fair."
Hmm. Hmm.
Fair. I did everything right, and it's so funny because there's other times in my life where I was like, "I did everything right," and I had a flare. It happens, but this kind of like when it came to the fertility journey, really hit me. The other time was COVID. That was extremely challenging because I had to work from home 100%. I had to be my doctor wrote all the notes and filled out all the paperwork for me to work from home 100%, until I had at least 3 immunizations, and but my one doctor and for the first year was like, "Don't leave your home. If you go for a walk, you can walk around your home." Literally around my home, not even like the street around my home. So I did not leave this block of property for
Yeah.
months, and I was that was hard. That was very hard. So, was not necessarily my lupus symptoms, but it was because of my compromised immune health that my doctors were saying, "You need to stay in a bubble." After so many months of that, it really played on your mental health.
No question.
It's on your mental health. So I had to go back to my doctor to be like, "I respect that for my immune health, I should not be going outside of this bubble, but I'm telling you,
Yeah.
I need to increase my bubble
Oh, yeah. Got to stretch it out a little bit.
because this is not going to go well if I stay in this bubble
Right.
until immunizations." We kind of negotiated of, okay, you can go for some walks, like outside activities, walks and bike rides and things. Yes. Still have somebody else do the groceries. Still, don't work on site at the hospital. But you can go beyond your bubble if you're doing something outside because we know at least the risk there is lower than you. So I had to negotiate, which I think we always, as the patients are, we on the one hand, we don't always necessarily agree with the recommendations from our treating practitioners and professionals, but we often will try to respect that. But we always have the right to kind of push back and be like, well, that recommendation doesn't really match for me or isn't going to work for me.
Yeah.
Important too.
I commend you for recognizing that because sometimes we can feel the walls closing in and you get more down on yourself, but you don't even realize it's happening.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. It's
And
hard.
you had mentioned mindfulness earlier. In what other ways have you taken care of yourself mentally throughout your journey?
So the mindfulness has always been a big part. That was introduced to me by the primary nurse when I was first diagnosed years ago. So before it was even like a fad word. But I'm also big on movement every day, whatever that might look like. My movement for today may just be swinging my arms up and down, and or just doing lying on the ground and doing a few light stretches, and that's it. Because some days that's all that the body is permitting.
Right.
Big proponent of moving every day, fresh air as many days as possible. Depending on the weather, if there's a weather advisory, and right now we have like a air quality advisory, then You respect and limit of what makes sense for you if it's too hot or too cold, and but I still get fresh air and movement every day, something I enjoy. Something I enjoy, even if it's just 10 minutes of working on a little stitching project or something, but something that will make me smile or laugh every day. So it's kind of a bit of a mix. Nothing grandiose, something that, they're all things that everybody can do. But sometimes when you're feeling so overwhelmed of I have this many appointments to schedule and I have this physiotherapy exercise to do, or I have this other thing to do, and oh, I still have my all the other life stuff of the pile of laundry needs it can be overwhelming to think about where do you fit these other things, and that's where I kind of try to keep it as simple as possible.
Understandable. I'm thinking about you being on this journey for, the vast majority of your life and talking about the priority of getting movement every day. How would you say your relationship with your body has evolved throughout the journey? Thinking about all the new ways you're moving and grooving while still trying to build the life that you want. Like, how are you making it happen?
Yeah, how I move has changed over time. Certainly my joints don't let me run anymore, but so there's the whole process, there's a whole thing there. There's certainly been a trajectory. I was a dancer when I was a teenager, and there's been times in my life where yeah, my movement was just getting from point A to point B, but making a point of at least just trying to walk there if I could, instead of parking right next to the door. So it has been a journey. There has been some fluctuations. Perceptions are always changing of body, right? There's weight gain, there's loss. There can be a heavy emphasis in follow-up to monitor for any weight changes in the medical clinic. And so there's always a spotlight on it. And so I try not to focus on it too much myself. The only times I really did was when I had to, like when I was pregnant, they really wanted me to monitor
Mhm.
in between appointments and whatnot. So clinically necessary, but really trying not to focus on it too much. I really try to focus on what I can do instead of what I can't do or I could do differently. So on a small scale example, I woke up about a month ago, and we don't know if this is a lupus thing or a perimenopause thing, but I woke up a month ago and I had some ass stuff going on. My shoulder, and I couldn't move my neck or shoulder. Thought I flipped a disc in my upper neck, my C1, C2, and not, but it was bad enough that I had no sensation down my arm and no movement up or down my arm.
My goodness.
That I was in. So normally I'm fortunate. There's a gym at work. And so when I'm able to escape for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, then I go to the gym at lunch and get a little movement in or go for a walk with some colleagues. And so I had a couple weeks where I couldn't do anything. And so sudden changes like that are still very, very hard. Even
Mhm.
like years, and you're like, "Oh, this sucks. I can't do my movement." Like, find the movement not only helps with the pain and helps with just some flexibility, looseness, ease of movement and whatnot, but it does help with the mental health stuff and general coping as well. And so having a couple weeks where I couldn't do anything and I was just going back and forth from chiropractor appointment and massage and osteopath and just trying to get things loosened up,
Mhm.
that was really hard. I had to really be working on my mindfulness of my acceptance, my patience, and trusting the process, and all of these mindfulness skills. I'm
Right.
like, hey, it's a temporary thing. And then when I started back to the gym, I was like, okay, so can't hold weights with my arms right now. What else can I do? And I was like, oh, well, this is interesting. I haven't done this in a long time. Why don't we try that? And so I just going to work on my balance. So I've just been doing a lot of standing or moving on unstable surfaces at the gym, being like, I'm going to move how I can. The first 2 weeks were rough of like, why can't I do anything? I really don't like this. This is going to, and I had these thoughts of this is going to set me back. And at the same time, part of me that knew it wasn't safe for me to be doing movement, but still yourself for that. And then after a couple weeks, I kind of digested and it's just gonna do what I can. That's okay for now. This is all temporary. I have been through this before where I can't exercise and it's fine and we just, you know, one step at a time. So journey.
I think what I appreciate about what you're saying, though, it sounds like you're aspiring towards demonstrating a kindness toward the self, which I think, especially with us having to sort of do less than we used to or less than we'd like to it can be very difficult to accept the fact, okay, I'm going to do this. I can't do the like Ironman tryout workout. I need to be able to just, be satisfied with what I can do and be consistent with what I can do.
Yeah. Self-compassion is huge. To me, it like underlies everything.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
And then what you said reminds me of something that I say to other, well, patients that I work with at the hospital, but also other individuals that I connect with through autoimmune and rheumatology communities. Like, should is a bad word. Whether it's a should that you have in your mind for where you should be at life or what you should be able to do, or what,
Hmm.
but also from the other side, the shoulds that you feel and you hear from others, we need to work with those too. We need to work with those too from a compassionate lens, and compassionately set and maintain our own boundaries, which is really hard, which is really hard. Target's always moving every day of what you can and cannot do, and your boundaries. But yes, self-compassion at foremost before every.
Question.
I appreciate that so much. And thinking about all the shoulds that we think we should be doing, how have you balanced? You talk about all your medical appointments, you're still working full time and adapting throughout that. How are you managing all these different projects that you have going on with the uncertainty that comes with lupus?
Yeah, I guess I refuse to let my lupus or any of my conditions stop me from pursuing my dreams, but within a caveat of I modify the timeline, and my schooling took me longer than maybe, undergrad. 4 years is what they sign you up for, right? Well, it took me longer, and that's okay.
Hmm.
I use that same kind of strategy through everything, right? It's just kind of pacing and seeing where my energy is at today. And so maybe my energy is just doing crafting. Okay, that's what I work on today. And then if my energy is something else, then I work on that with the baseline that, of course, my health comes first, and my family. Sometimes it's a bit of a balance between both. But I'm also where the things I'm doing now, I wouldn't have been able to do when I was flaring at 16 or when my kids were younger. So there's ages and stages to everything. And sometimes the goals take longer to achieve, but it doesn't mean that we should be ignoring our goal. Or maybe we have to modify what that goal looks like and kind of find the nugget of what's really appealing to us for that goal, and then still achieve that goal, but in a safe way, keeping all of our health needs in mind. And then some of our other, uh, kind of, I call them non-negotiables, not just your self-care, but time with your family and
Yeah,
those, yeah.
definitely. So when you think about where you are and all that you've gone through, what would you consider the gifts inside this journey? Like, what are the things that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt are part of who you are? Like, whether it's like you're talking about values or your sense of purpose and just the things that you find beautiful along the way. What are the things that you really appreciate about who you've become because of this journey?
Yeah. So ironically, I was diagnosed at a young age. Like, for the most part, I am. It shaped very much who I am. It shaped how I approach life. I learned how to live a balanced life much earlier because I had to. And I have to be honest, I don't know that I would be as positive about my diagnosis if I was diagnosed last week.
For sure.
Completely upended my adult life. Whereas I learned all these skills earlier, and I shaped my life around it. I have a job that I have benefits. If I didn't have my diagnosis, I would have pursued a job where I was self-employed and didn't have benefits. And then if the diagnosis came along, well, then financially, that would have been a lot more challenging, right? So,
Question.
example, right? Just as one example, but there would have been a lot of other kind of fallout. So I'm actually very thankful that I was diagnosed at a young age because it taught me so much. It taught me that, yeah, just in terms of balancing what was important to me day to day, reassessing that constantly, appreciating the good support that was around me, knowing that there was going to be friendships that came and gone, or relationships that come and go in life. And there's a lot of and then of course learning that, like, self-compassion piece, and accepting where you're at and what you can do or not do. led me to it be easier for me to kind of move through different phases of my life. But I did mention earlier how I've still had, you still have your ups and downs, but I think I've moved more, more didn't get as maybe as down
Mhm.
mental health wise, or maybe moved more quickly through than someone else might have. But I think life is still, you can say you've adjusted well, even if there's ups and downs. That's realistic to say we're not having ups and downs, even if you're really good at living with a chronic condition. If you can, is
Still human.
that even me?
Yeah.
I don't know, I've rambled a lot, and I don't know if I fully answered your question, but I
No, you've painted a portrait because I think especially the point where you talked about the timing of it all, because to your point, if it was something where you had an established rhythm of like, I know who I am, and then this, just comes and derails all of that, that is a shock to the system in a different way than it's sort of setting the table for who you will become. Like both, I think, can be catastrophic if we allow it to be, but I think it's all about navigating where you are on the journey. So
yeah. And I can't, the one thing I can't answer is more of like a personality things, because even I've been asked this many times over the years of like how have you coped with all of this? And those that know me more closely are like, you just shrug your shoulders and just roll with it. If you need to adapt to something or you need to change something or whatever, you just like you don't ever get like hugely or kind of have this huge grief process over something. Yes, I feel the emotions. I'm human, but
of course.
I don't let it kind of stop me. I just kind of be like, okay, now what?
Mhm.
And because I've done that from such a young age, it's hard to speak to. Is that a personality trait, or is that something that like did I have that from when I was 4 years old? Like I
Right,
don't
right.
know.
Exactly.
But I think it's more of a personality thing. So just that type of person that just can just roll with things, right? So
Mhm.
one of the quotes is like when you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, be water. And it's kind of just
Yes, Bruce Lee.
like just go. And that's kind of I've I've always kind of been flow with certain life things, but I like this new quote.
Yeah, no, that's one of my favorites, from Bruce Lee. Is like, "Be like water," and just sort of like adapt to the container that you're in. But I think you're also making me think about how what is in us sort of comes out of us in times of pressure, right? So it's like if, we're an olive being like crushed, that's gonna make oil, you know what I mean? And I think just the ways in which the difficulties in life help us to either realize who we are because of how we respond to adversity, or realize like a strength, dare I say, an invisible strength that we didn't know we had the whole time.
Within the caveat that I live a lot of privilege at the same time, right? I have good social supports. I have
True.
a very supportive husband, family, a lot of good friends, lost some friends over the years, but at the
No
same
doubt.
time, that's all part of it. I am stable financially. When we think of like socio-demographic kind of different risk factors, I don't tick necessarily a lot of those boxes except for invisible disability kind of, right? And absolutely, all of that influences on how stable your health is and what your options are to pursue support or to pursue education, pursue your job, pursue like just feeling who you are, right? And that impact on your mental health. It benefits. I can get help with a lot of different things, but if my finances were differently, well then I would have to maybe be living with the symptoms, which is a lot. I just I want to recognize that there's a lot there, not just my health, and I always like to just mention that I'm very aware that I live with a lot of privilege,
Mhm. Mhm.
advocating for, yeah, I look healthy, but
Right. That part. That
you know,
part.
work to look like this. But there's a lot of other privilege at the same time.
I appreciate you recognizing that. But I'm hearing you talk about relationships, and one thing I want to touch on that's a big question for a lot of young people going through chronic conditions earlier on in their lives is how do you tell a prospective partner that you have this lifelong chronic illness, and how did you navigate that throughout dating and meeting your husband?
Yeah. I told every single one of my boyfriends and current partner within like the first time of us chatting and meeting. Again, I'm a very upfront kind of person. Did I list off all the symptoms and how it might impact us? And no. Did I loosely say how it impacted me in the moment? Yeah, because there were some times where my arthritis was so bad I couldn't hold a pencil or tie my own shoe. So kind of like my date. And again, very fortunate. All of them were very understanding, very accepting. I had some come to appointments with me. And so again, could be a very different reaction for different people. But I was very fortunate that I was upfront of I have this diagnosis. I take this medication. I can't do this for myself, or I can do this, and just kind of left it at that. And over time, we talked more and more, depending on the depth and the length of the relationship. And so, yeah, I don't know. I have a great answer for that because I had such a good experience with disclosing to anybody in my life.
Well, I can't help but think if they have a poor reaction, you're probably not meant to be with that person anyway.
Right. That's a good sign early on.
Maybe it's a good filtering mechanism.
No, if so in my mind, like if you're I know we can't always wait for a perfect time, but if you're dating, then your health is in a certain position that you're thinking about dating and like and so you're not necessarily so you're wanting to disclose that. You're wanting to filter that out, right? Yeah, not getting into the details, but I think it's important to be upfront about. Maybe not on the first date like I did, but
Third, things are going well, just kind of like, by the way.
yeah, fair to them, right? To have like direction if it wasn't something that they were going to be okay with. There's a lot of uncertainty there. When I was first diagnosed, I was told like I won't complete any post-secondary education. I was too sick that the way they foresaw my future, I would barely finish high school. I wouldn't have kids. They kind of laid it out that way for me. And oh, I didn't get into that detail at first. Those things came out in longer relationships, but I think it's important. I think it's important for us to be a certain amount of honest. Obviously, I've been talking about things from the beginning, but I think it's important for the other person. It can be very overwhelming to think about how are they going to perceive this? What are they going to think of me? How are they going to judge me? We can't control how someone else is going to react. I've been teaching communication groups at the hospital for several years now with different patient populations, and there's always a worry for how others are going to act to us sharing a piece of ourselves,
Hmm.
whether it be our diagnosis or just thought or a desire or what your emotion is, what you're feeling about something that happened. And we can't, we should not be, there's that should word, we should not be worried about someone else's reaction because we cannot control how someone else is going to react. If we do, then we're not speaking our truth. Then we're holding all of that in and we're ruminating on it, and then that stress builds inside, and then that's not helpful for any of our mental health or physical symptoms. And so healthy conversations, absolutely, all the way.
No question. No doubt about it. So, Jodie, if someone were listening to this episode and they had just gotten diagnosed last week, either with lupus or another life-altering illness, and they found themselves in a very low moment, what would you want them to know?
hmm I would want them to know that they're not alone because I think at first patients can feel very alone. And if they don't already have someone in their immediate circle who's supportive, then absolutely I'd be encouraging them to connect with someone online because there's such a network online now. Or they're feeling like they're more of an in person type of individual, then there's lots of options for that too. But absolutely, to not feel like you're alone, it would be the first. We want to normalize and we want to get support. That helps build everything from there of the compassion and everything else that comes. Yeah.
Beautiful advice. Jodie, I want to ask, what does invisible strength mean to you?
Oh, to me, invisible strength is We don't always have to talk about these things all the time. We don't always have to be like, rah, rah, I do all these things and I live with this invisible condition. To me, it's quietly going about my life, pursuing my dreams and living what however I define a good life. You define a good life, but how I define a good life, despite my condition. Others then can see that quiet strength or that invisible strength that comes with that. Related to that, I've had a lot of conversations and thoughts with July being Disability Pride Month, and there's a lot of nuances there of like, are we proud of having a disability? But we should be proud that we're continuing to advocate and educate those around us. But should we be proud of it? And so there's sometimes these words that can have two meanings. They're double sided. So it's tricky, right? We want to keep increasing increasing accessibility and really continuing with the voice at the local and the national level and trying to change policy and just trying to educate more just every day too, day-to-day conversations. I'm pointing out, well, that term is outdated. Please update your vocabulary. It's a
Right.
small thing, but am I proud that I have to do that or that I continue to do that? I don't know. So I think it's kind of the same thing with invisible strength. It's just, you just keep you just keep going and know that some people will notice, but it's all necessary.
I appreciate your thoughtfulness. Go ahead, Chris.
No, all good. Yeah, I was just wondering with there's just a tremendous story that you have and a tremendous work that you're doing. Like, what's next? What are you building? What are you excited about looking forward to, with your platform and everything else going on?
Oh, goodness, I don't even know. I don't even know. For me, it right now, to be honest, if we're thinking like immediate future, it is summertime and just time with my two kids is my
Yes.
immediate
Nice. I
like
feel you.
yeah.
Jodie, for people who want to learn more and get your book, where can they follow you? And then where can they get your book?
Yeah, so online is fabulupus.book, and then the book is available online as well through Amazon, nationally, internationally, but in Canada, it's all available on Indigo as well.
Wonderful. We'll put those links in the description. Thank you. Jodie, you were so wonderful and fabulous to talk to. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I greatly enjoyed this.
And thank you as always, Chris. It's great to have you a part of these conversations.
Was a joy for sure.
To our community, make sure you hit subscribe and check out invigorateyourjourney.com. We have all sorts of resources and support to help you throughout your chronic condition. So until next time, take care. Peace.